Sharon sat in front of the mirror, watching herself being made up by Cinta's chosen Mua. Sharon couldn't stop smiling as she looked at herself, who had become even more beautiful. A white kebaya with a pink combination was already attached to her slender body. Today was Sharon and Revan's wedding day. Although it felt too soon, Sharon couldn't deny that she was happy. Soon, she and Revan would be husband and wife.
"If I mate with Vian, then you'll be my mother-in-law?"
said Novi, who had been watching Sharon.
Sharon, who heard that, laughed softly. Ridiculous, right? But maybe this was God's destiny.
If God hadn't willed it, she and Revan wouldn't have come this far.
That's how it is. I'm free to bully you and Renata,
Sharon said. Novi snickered softly at that. How annoying.
"Die, it's good,"
Novi replied unhappily. The Mua, who was a woman, just smiled, listening to Sharon and Novi's conversation. She then moved away a little, having finished doing Sharon's hair.
"Already done. Do you want to go downstairs now?"
The Mua asked. Sharon nodded slowly. Finally, Sharon was helped by Novi and the Mua to walk downstairs to the first floor of Revan's house, which was used as a place for the arcade. Renata was not there because she chose to wait downstairs with the others. As they descended the stairs, everyone's gaze in the living room was directed at Sharon.
She looked beautiful in the kebaya she was wearing now.
Not to mention her makeup and hair dough. Her sweet smile made the guests feel awe and wonder. Revan couldn't stop staring at Sharon with an admiring gaze. He did not blink at all until Sharon finally sat down beside him. Sharon gave Revan a gentle smile. They stared at each other for a long time, until the sound of the Pengulu's Dihi man made them realize. Sharon looked down, feeling embarrassed. The ceremony began with a prayer. Sharon's heart was beating faster every second, feeling nervous because soon her status will change to Revan's wife. The ijab kabul began, and Sharon became even more nervous, staring at her decorated fingers over and over again. Her eyes closed tightly as Revan began to speak.
"I accept the marriage and dowry of Sharina Arvaliana, bin Fendi Januardi, with a dowry of 200 grams of gold and 200 million cash, paid in cash."
Sharon closed her eyes and smiled with emotion. Now she was legally Revan's wife. Sharon couldn't hold back her own tears of joy, smiling because she was happy.
The echo of the word Sa was heard filling the room.
And that made Sharon even happier. After putting the rings on each other, Sharon kissed the back of Revan's hand solemnly. Then it was Revan's turn to kiss Sharon's forehead so gently. This sacred moment was captured in a photo and video by Vano and Vian. They were happy to see their father, who had found his soulmate after so long choosing to be alone. After the ceremony, the guests went home. Sharon and Revan prepared to go to the wedding hall for the reception.
Thank you, Mass. I still can't believe I'm married,
Sharon said. Now she and Revan were in the car heading to the wedding hall they had rented.
"I should be the one thanking you. I feel like I have a purpose in life again,"
Revan replied. Sharon smiled and hugged her husband tightly. Yes, her husband. In front of them was Vano driving and Vian beside him. They were amused by their new mom and dad's conversation. However, they were happy to see them happy.
"We've arrived."
Vano woke up the newlywed couple who were busy making out. He and Vian helped Sharon lift the tail of her kabaya to avoid being stepped on. Sharon was immediately escorted to a special room to change clothes, to change into a wedding dress.
Pa, congratulations. I'm sorry that Vian and I have caused so much trouble for Papa and made it difficult for Papa to find a life partner all this time.
Vano spoke to Revan after Sharon entered the dressing room.
Revan patted Vano lightly on the back, smiling.
"Don't talk about that anymore. Everything that has happened is destiny."
Revan replied. Vano and Vian smiled together at that.
"So what should I call Sharon? Mama? Mom?"
asked Vian. Revan laughed at that. It was strange to have a mother who was the same age. But this did happen in Vano's life as well as Vian's.
"Anything as long as you're comfortable." Sharon won't mind.
Revan replied. Vano and Vian nodded slowly. They had to think carefully about what to call their new mother. The wedding reception went smoothly. One by one, guests came to congratulate Revan and Sharon. Some of Sharon's college friends were surprised to learn that Sharon was married to Vano and Vian's father. However, they still gave their best wishes. Sharon also invited some of the lecturers who taught her classes. Towards noon, Sharon's mother came as an invited guest. She only came alone. Even if she came with her husband, Sharon did not want to meet him. Tanya hugged Sharon and congratulated her. There was no pleasantries whatsoever. After greeting Revan, Tanya went straight down the aisle. As Sharon could see, her mother passed by her father. They greeted each other. Then Tanya went to the table to get some food.
There's something strange about Mama.
Sharon muttered. Revan, who was sitting next to her, could hear Sharon's words.
Strange?
Revan asked.
Sharon looked down and nodded slowly.
There must be a problem with her husband. I'm sure since Anton went to prison, their relationship hasn't been as good as before. Sharon replied. Revan was silent at that. His eyes were now watching Tanya, who was his mother-in-law. Tanya was eating her food and occasionally looked lost in thought, as if thinking about something. There could be a problem with her husband. Her husband must be angry because his son went to jail because of his wife's biological son. While they were both watching Tanya, suddenly someone came up the aisle. Revan and Sharon spontaneously stood up to greet the guests. Sharon's bright smile immediately faded when she saw who was standing in front of her now, especially when that person took off his glasses. Congratulations to you. Unfortunately, Vian's wish could not be fulfilled.
Congratulations to you. Too bad Vian's wish couldn't be fulfilled.
Sharon was silent when she heard that. It amused her to hear Dilla speak using Vian as an excuse.
Did she not know that her children, especially Vian, were already aware of everything?
Or was she pretending not to know just to make Sharon uncomfortable and annoyed?
Thank you for taking the time to attend,
Sharon said with a smile, trying not to get emotional.
This was her wedding day, her happiest day, her most special day.
So Sharon didn't want everything to fall apart just because of her husband's ex-wife.
Dilla forced a smile, seeing Sharon smiling flatly at her. She didn't expect Sharon's response to be that calm.
And yes, she did want to provoke the couple's emotions.
I didn't expect Vanu and Vian to have a mother the same age as them. It must be very strange.
Dilla spoke again. Revan immediately gave her a warning look. However, Dilla became even more defiant.
Mom came here too. With whom, Mum? Alone?
Before Dilla could finish her sentence, Vano and Vian climbed up the aisle and approached her. They smiled at Dilla and immediately took her mother by the hand.
We'll go downstairs first. Mom has to eat before we leave here,
Vano said. He and Vian then forcefully pulled Dilla down from the aisle. They didn't let her talk or move around as much as she wanted. Revan and Sharon desperately held back their laughter as they watched Dilla being overwhelmed by her own children. Sharon could see that Vano and Vian did not let go of Dilla's hand even for a moment. Even when eating, they deliberately fed Dilla so that they could hold her hand. It was really like a prisoner who was worried about escaping.
They know what to do,
said Revan. He laughed softly, amused at how Vano and Vian pestered Dilla, making her dizzy and overwhelmed. Sharon smiled and hugged Revan, leaning her head on his chest. Of course, Sharon's actions caught the attention of the guests.
They whistled teasingly at the newlyweds' intimacy.
And Sharon could only laugh as she hugged her husband even tighter. Vano and Vian smiled at Revan and Sharon. Happiness was clearly on the faces of the newlyweds.
Dilla, on the other hand, had to endure the annoyance of her own 2 children.
Ma, forgive us both, but this is how it should be. Mama doesn't need to be present in Papa's life anymore. It's better for Mama and Papa to go their own way. Please don't disturb Papa's happiness. Don't make me and Vian hate Mama,
Vano said as he let go of his mother's hand. His eyes looked straight into the eyes of the woman who had given birth to him.
That's right. Papa is already happy with his own choice. Vano and I have forgiven Mama for disappearing for 10 years without seeing us even for a day. So Mama don't make mistakes that can make me and Vano angry and away from Mama.
Continued Vian. His eyes looked so serious when he said all that. Dilla was silent, with a feeling of disappointment filling her heart. Of course she could understand what her two sons had just said. They were more inclined to defend Sharon. Dilla didn't speak and immediately moved away from there. Vano and Vian did not hold back, letting their mother walk away. Let it be. Instead of their mother staying there and making a scene, the reception went smoothly until it was over. Revan and Sharon returned to Revan's house, driven by Vano. After dropping off his parents, Vano returned to the building to help Vian transport all the wedding gifts and bring them home. Revan's room is the room they will be staying in.
It was beautifully decorated, but not overdone.
The dimly lit atmosphere with aromatherapy candles in the corners of the room added a romantic feel.
Wow! It's beautiful!
Sharon murmured. She smiled and walked in, looking around the room. Revan stepped closer to Sharon and immediately hugged his wife. Sharon smiled happily, looking at her husband standing in front of her.
Mom is indeed clever. Everything you've chosen is good. Nothing disappoints.
Sharon praised.
Revan smiled at that. Of course, his mom did what was best for his and Sharon's marriage. Sharon walked over to Revan and immediately hugged him.
She couldn't stop smiling.
Everything that happened today made her very happy.
Sharon couldn't stop thanking God for giving her husband as good as Revan.
Moss, so we're leaving for France tomorrow?
Sharon asked. Her head looked up, staring at her husband, who was much taller than her.
Of course. We leave in the evening.
Revan replied. His hand touched Sharon's head and rubbed it gently.
Then I should pack now.
Sharon released her embrace on her husband's body. As she was about to take a step towards the cupboard, Revan held her back,
hugging her tightly from behind.
Want to ignore me? Packing can be done. Tomorrow.
Revan whispered in Sharon's ear. Sharon smiled amusedly at that.
Sharon turned her body around, facing Revan.
Her hands immediately wrapped around her husband's neck, throwing a seductive smile. Revan was delighted to see Sharon smiling like that. Impatiently, Revan kissed Sharon. Sharon laughed to herself, seeing Revan's impatience. Not resisting, Sharon tried to keep up with Revan's lip play. After a while, Sharon pushed Revan's body until the link of their lips was broken. Sharon's breathing was ragged, her face flushed, and Revan smiled at that.
All ready, Moss. I'm going to take a shower first.
Sharon pushed Revan's body away from her. Quickly, Sharon walked into the bathroom, avoiding Revan, leaving Revan, who was clucking in annoyance. Inside the bathroom, Sharon laughed. It felt so satisfying to be able to play a prank on Revan. Revan, meanwhile, had to patiently wait for his wife, who was in the bathroom. After Sharon came out of the bathroom, Revan came in. Sharon was wearing light blue, long-sleeved satin pajamas. After drying her hair, Sharon went downstairs to the first floor. Apparently, Vano and Vian were arranging their wedding gifts in the living room.
Is this everything?
Sharon asked. Vano and Vian glanced at each other and then shook their heads slowly.
Not yet. There's still more in the building. We just asked a taxi to bring it.
Vano replied. Sharon nodded slowly. She smiled at the number of gifts there.
She wanted to open them all now. She was afraid she wouldn't have time.
She had to pack for tomorrow's departure to France.
This is a gift from your mom. She left it with me and asked me to give it to you directly.
Vian said as he handed her a square box wrapped in gold-colored wrapping paper. Sharon accepted it and immediately opened it out of curiosity. When the lid of the box was opened, Sharon immediately saw a beautifully framed photograph. A photo of a 3-year-old girl being led by her parents. Sharon was touched by the photo. It was a photo of her past, when her parents were not yet divorced.
Sharon smiled a little as she gently rubbed the photo.
The photo was one of Sharon's beautiful memories, and Sharon did not expect her mother still kept that photo.
Whose photo?
Sharon squinted in surprise and immediately looked back. Apparently, Revan was already standing behind her and looking at the photo.
A picture of me when I was little, when Papa and Mama weren't divorced.
Sharon replied. Sharon smiled as she put the photo away on a decorative shelf. Then Sharon found a piece of paper in the gift box.
Sharon picked it up and read the inscription.
My daughter, congratulations on your new life. Forgive your mom for not being able to walk you down the aisle. Forgive your mother for not knowing anything about her own child. Your mom is very sorry after all this time. However, I know your forgiveness is not deserved. Even so, Mama always hopes that you will forgive her. Be a good wife for your husband. Later, if you have children, love your children with all your heart. Because when we are old, we will need our children. I'm sorry I can't give you much. I only have this photo for your gift.
May you always be happy with your new family.
I will always pray for the best for you.
Can this be proof that you're sorry?
Sharon asked after finishing reading the letter.
Revan straightened up after reading the letter.
It could be. Your mom was wrong to raise child. Loving stepchildren is a must. But that doesn't mean abandoning your own children.
Revan replied.
Sharon took a deep breath and exhaled slowly.
Sharon put the letter in the box and put it away, along with the photo gift.
Sorry for the trouble. If there are still many, just stack them in the living room. I don't know when I will open all the presents,
Sharon said to her 2 stepchildren. After that, Sharon turned to go back to her room. Revan looked at his 2 children and nodded slowly. Then he followed Sharon into the room.
Vano and Vian looked at each other for a moment, then went back to tidying up the gift.
In the room, Sharon displayed the picture of her and her parents on top of the drawer. Then she put the box and letter into the drawer. Sharon looked at the photo for a long time. A photo that Sharon herself forgot when she took it.
Now, what do you wish for them?
Revan asked after standing beside Sharon.
Sharon, who heard that, exhaled softly.
I'll just support whatever they choose.
Sharon replied. She then turned around, looking at Revan. Putting both hands around Revan's neck, she threw him a seductive smile.
Since when did you become like this?
Revan asked with one eyebrow raised. Even so, he still moved to hug Sharon's slender waist.
Since I became your wife, Moss.
Sharon replied in a low voice. She then chuckled, amused by her current status. Revan was silent upon hearing that. Hugging Sharon tighter, he kissed her forehead gently. Then, in one fell swoop, Revan picked Sharon up, bringing his wife closer to the bed. Then gently, Revan laid her there. Sharon looked at Revan intently. Her face flushed red as Revan took off his shirt and lay shirtless in front of her. Sharon immediately looked away, feeling embarrassed. The bed moved slowly as Revan climbed onto it.
Staring at Sharon intensely, Sharon's heart raced.
Sharon was aware and knew what would happen next. However, she still felt embarrassed and nervous. Revan touched Sharon's hair and stroked it lightly, then gave Sharon a light peck all over her face. Sharon couldn't help but smile happily when Revan treated her so gently and carefully. Then Revan kissed Sharon on the lips. It started with a light peck, until finally his lips moved to lick. Sharon moaned softly as Ran sucked firmly on her lower lip.
Revan unlinked their lips and looked back at Sharon intensely.
Sharon's hands were on the sides of Revan's face.
Her eyes stared back at him, then her head nodded to indicate that she was ready.
Sharon's eyes closed tightly as Revan's lips began to explore her neck. She bit her lower lip firmly, holding back a sigh. A chill ran down Sharon's spine as Revan managed to undo all the buttons of her pajamas. Sharon dared not look at Revan, keeping her eyes closed. Embarrassed, because now Revan was looking at her innocent body.
Heat spread as Revan's large hands touched every inch of Sharon's skin that he touched.
Sharon hissed in pleasure as she felt the top of her chest being touched.
This was a first for her, and everything felt surprising.
The sensation made Sharon feel as if she was floating. Revan faced Sharon again, staring at her with his face flushed. Sharon's hand clawed Revan's back and bit Revan's shoulder firmly to muffle the scream.
Tears escaped down her cheeks as Revan tried to get inside her.
The unbearable pain made Sharon shed tears.
Sorry.
Revan whispered as he gently kissed Sharon's forehead. After a long silence, Revan began to move. Sharon winced, feeling sore and painful. However, it was all replaced with an incomparable pleasure. Sharon screamed as she reached the peak. Her body shook, then went limp. Revan followed suit, hiding his delicious expression in the crook of Sharon's neck. Sharon chuckled as she hugged her husband's firm back. It was amazing. Revan pulled away and lay down beside Sharon. His hands pulled back the blanket to cover their naked bodies. Then they hugged each other tightly.
Does it still hurt?
Asked Revan.
A little.
Sharon's head moved, seeking comfortable position on Revan's chest. Then her eyes closed, trying to neutralize the rush of breath. A small smile was etched on her lips. This is how beautiful it is to make love with your loved one.
Get some sleep. Tomorrow we have to pack.
Revan whispered.
Sharon nodded and began to close her eye.
She couldn't wait to leave for her honeymoon tomorrow. Day after day passed by Sharon as Revan's wife. After returning from her honeymoon, Sharon returned to her usual activities. The only difference now is that she has a husband. Not just a husband, it seems. Sharon also has 2 children now. Wow. In the morning before leaving for college, Sharon would help Bik Asai prepare breakfast. It was a pleasure for Sharon to cook for her husband and the twins. Although she didn't know their appetites, Sharon hoped they would like her cooking. After she finished cooking, Sharon made a small run to the 2nd floor. First, she went into the room she shared with Revan, her husband. As it turned out, Revan had just come out of the bathroom. He only had a towel hanging from his hip and a small towel to dry his hair. Despite being married and husband and wife, Sharon was still embarrassed when she saw Revan shirtless. Revan, on the other hand, seemed to love teasing Sharon. Although Sharon repeatedly told him to get dressed in the bathroom, Revan didn't listen.
Moss, breakfast is ready. I'll wait downstairs,
Sharon said.
She quickly turned around to get out of the room.
However, Revan stopped her in her tracks. Sharon couldn't help but turn around to look at her husband, who was not yet dressed.
What the hell, Moss?
Asked Sharon angrily. Revan chuckled amusedly at his wife's blushing cheeks. He walked up to Sharon and deliberately teased her. Sharon backed away slowly until her back touched the wall. Inwardly, Sharon grumbled. Why did the room feel so cramped when things were like this?
Move aside, Moss. I'm going downstairs,
Sharon said. She tried to get rid of Revan's hand that was holding her body.
Did you wake up the kids?
Asked Revan. His face was so close to Sharon that Sharon could feel his breath.
Not yet, so move aside. I want to wake them up,
Sharon said angrily. Revan smiled and hugged Sharon. Sharon let out a small squeal of surprise. She looked sharply at Revan, who was smiling slyly.
Just a moment.
Revan whispered. He pulled Sharon closer to him.
Sharon looked up, and Revan immediately grabbed her lips,
holding Sharon's head so as not to move away and resist. Sharon, who was originally rebelling, ended up enjoying it, squeezing Revan's hair, which was still half wet. Sharon moaned softly as Revan pressed her against the wall. His lips explored Sharon's neck, making her hiss in pleasure. Sharon tried to gather her wits so as not to get lost in Revan's game. She had class in an hour and a half and couldn't be late. Not to mention she had to have breakfast before going to class.
Moss, stop! I have to go to college,
Sharon said softly with a sigh. With difficulty, Sharon pushed Revan's body away from her.
Sharon's breathing was ragged with all her shirt buttons undone.
Sharon quickly fixed her appearance so as not to make Revan even crazier when he saw her body.
What time do you have class?
Revan asked, with a feeling of resentment. Sharon felt guilty seeing her husband, who looked upset. But what can we do?
Moss, there's still tonight. Today I have a morning class, so I have to rush off,
Sharon said pleadingly.
Revan let out a rough breath and immediately turned his back to Sharon.
He walked to the wardrobe and picked up his clothes.
Moss, I'll wait downstairs,
Sharon said. Revan didn't answer anything. and Sharon knew her husband was sulking. Let it be. She could persuade him later after college.
Sharon then left the room and approached the twins' room.
Sharon didn't enter, just knocked from outside while calling their name. After getting an answer, Sharon went downstairs to set the breakfast on the dining table.
After a few minutes, Vano and Vian came down together and immediately sat down.
Revan, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. Sharon became worried that her husband would go on a hunger strike. Duh! This is how hard it is to have a spoiled husband.
Where's Papa, Bun?
Asked Vano.
Sharon gave him a glance and poured rice for her 2 stepchildren.
Still in his room.
Sharon replied. Bunda was the nickname that Vano and Vian chose to call Sharon. Although they still felt strange calling Sharon as Bunda now, they were sure that one day they would get used to it. Vian looked at Sharon for a long time, then patted Vano's thigh lightly.
Vano looked at his twin sister in confusion, and Vian whispered to her.
Now Vano's gaze turned to Sharon, who was pouring water. Vian lowered his head, while Vano scratched his head that was not itchy. This kind of awkward atmosphere was not to Vano's liking.
What's wrong? Why aren't you guys eating?
Sharon asked when she saw that Vano and Vian hadn't touched their food. Vano and Vian did not answer and immediately ate the food on their plates. Their eye movements looked restless, making Sharon feel strange. Not thinking about the twins' strange behavior, Sharon went upstairs again to meet her husband. Sharon took a deep breath, thinking of ways to persuade her husband to join her for breakfast. If not, Sharon was afraid that Vano and Vian would think they were in trouble. Arriving at the room, Sharon saw Revan, who was busy with his laptop. In her heart, Sharon grumbled, "Here we go again. Revan is always like this when he sulks, which is to occupy himself with a laptop, even though he had no work to do."
Mas, let's have breakfast together. Vano and Vian are waiting downstairs.
Sharon approached Revan and sat down beside him. Revan just gave her a glance and nodded. He was busy with his laptop again. Sharon hissed in annoyance at being ignored.
Mas, I have a class this morning, so...
I know. Just leave with Vano and Vian.
Revan cut off Sharon's words. Sharon sneered at that. She wouldn't be able to stand it if Revan continued like this.
Like it or not, she had to give in.
Sharon closed Revan's laptop forcefully and sat on her husband's lap. Revan looked at her flatly, as if he wasn't interested. Even though Sharon knew, Revan was just holding back. Prestige. Sharon took off her own clothes, not forgetting to remove her breastplate, letting Revan see it clearly. Then Sharon sat facing Revan, with her arms around her husband's neck, looking flirtatiously into his eyes.
Do you still want to be quiet after me like this?
Sharon asked seductively.
One hand moved slowly over Revan's chest, trying to tease her husband.
Didn't you have class this morning? Why are you doing this?
Revan asked a question that irritated Sharon.
Come on. She had already embarrassed herself by deliberately going topless in front of Revan, but he was talking like that.
Quick love for this morning, Daddy.
Sharon whispered in front of Revan with her favorite nickname when Revan was sulking. Revan smiled wryly and immediately licked his wife's seductive lips. Sharon's hands moved quickly, undoing Revan's shirt and trousers. For once, she wanted to lead their short game. Hopefully, Vano and Vian wouldn't think anything of it since their parents had been in the dining room for a while. Sharon and Revan walked out of the room together to the dining room. Earlier, Revan told Sharon that she should cover her neck with something, and Sharon just realized that there was a kiss mark on her neck.
Sharon felt embarrassed, remembering Vano and Vian's reaction earlier.
Apparently, they both saw the kiss mark. Finally, Sharon put on foundation to cover the kiss mark. Although embarrassed, Sharon couldn't help but meet the 2 children face to face. When they arrived at the dining table, Vano and Vian tried to focus on their food, trying to ignore the fact that Sharon's hair now looked wet. Maybe she forgot to dry her hair while in the room earlier.
I'm going to visit Mom after I drop you off at college,
Revan said. Sharon smiled and nodded. Vano and Vian noticed how agile Sharon was in serving her father. Their hearts gave thanks that their father had not made a mistake in choosing a wife.
After class, I want to meet Farrell. He said he wants to discuss my book that has been marketed.
Sharon said, asking her husband for permission.
Revan nodded, giving permission. Farrell was the younger brother of Darren, the CEO of Revan's company.
Revan knew his friend's younger brother quite well.
So Revan always gave Sharon permission to meet him. Moreover, what they were discussing was Sharon's work.
When you want to go home, just call me. If I'm busy, you can call one of them.
Revan said as he looked at his two children.
You don't mind, do you?
Revan asked.
No, Dad.
Vano and Vian answered simultaneously. Sharon smiled a little at that. It was nice to hear their cohesiveness. After breakfast, they all got ready to leave. Vano and Vian took their respective cars, while Sharon was with her husband.
What are you doing at Mom's?
Sharon asked, after getting in the car with Revan. Fastening her seatbelt, she looked at Revan, who started the engine.
Just visiting. To see how Mom is.
Revan replied. Sharon nodded slowly. She smiled, happy to hear that Revan cared about her mother, because Sharon had heard that if a man loved his mother very much, then he would also love his wife. Whether that was true or not, it was clear that Revan did love his mother and his wife. Moreover, Sharon and Cinta never had any problem. As mother-in-law and son-in-law, they were always together. Sharon met with Farrell at a cafe while having lunch. They discussed the issue of royalties that Sharon would get from book sales, because Farrell marketed it to many bookstores and also marketed it online. Many books were sold, and Sharon also received quite a lot of royalties.
There's nothing wrong with me forcing you to publish. See? Your book sales are fantastic,
exclaimed Farrell. He was proud to have found a talented writer with a large following.
Thank you. This is all because of your help, too.
Sharon thanked him and smiled.
Okay, if you want to publish more works, just contact me. Oh, yes. I'll need your account number to transfer your share. I promise, I'll transfer it tonight,
Farrell said.
Sharon nodded slowly. She then wrote down her account number on a piece of paper and handed it to Farrell. After that, Farrell excused himself to go home first. He paid for his food as well as Sharon's.
The treat was a reward for Sharon for making his company grow.
So many writers also wanted to publish their works in Farrell's publishing house after knowing Sharon's satisfactory work. After Farrell's return, Sharon tried to contact Revan, but apparently Revan was attending an impromptu meeting at the company with the director. Then Sharon tried to contact Vano and Vian, and apparently Vian can pick her up now. Meanwhile, Vano still has business on campus. Sharon waited for a long time until someone approached her desk. Sharon thought it was Vian, so she immediately stood up and carried her bag. But when she saw apparently it wasn't Vian who was going to pick her up, instead, it was Vian's biological mother.
Where are you going? What's the hurry? I was just about to talk to you.
Dilla said with a smile. Sharon exhaled slowly and sat back down. She didn't know what Dilla wanted to say. Sharon's eyes looked out, and Vian was nowhere to be seen.
How does it feel to be Revan's wife? You look so happy.
Dilla said as she put her bag on the table. Sharon looked at the woman flatly.
After you officially became Revan's wife, Vano and Vian haven't visited me again. I hope you won't poison my children's minds and make them hate me.
Dilla spoke again. Sharon rolled her eyes at that.
Why would I do that? It was you who poisoned their minds to make them hate Mas Revan. And you did that for your own purposes. How selfish.
Sharon retorted. Dilla's eyes narrowed sharply as she received Sharon's reply.
Don't be a know-it-all. I've lived with Revan for a long time, and I know more about him.
Dilla's tone rose an octave. Sharon smiled sarcastically at that.
Yes, I know and understand. But your relationship is only in the past. For now, you don't know anything about Mas Revan. I, as his wife, know better.
Whoa! What do you know about Revan? He's just a man whose life is very monotonous and boring. I regret being his wife.
If you regret it, why pursue it now? Are you licking your own saliva?
Sharon asked. Dilla's face turned red, out of annoyance. She gave Sharon a hostile look.
I know you wanted to marry Revan because of wealth, right? Logically, if Revan was poor, how could you want to? And I know it was you who forbade Vano and Vian from seeing me. Well, Revan has chosen the wrong wife because his new wife wants to separate his children from their mother.
Dilla spoke passionately, saying all sorts of slanderous things and trying to corner Sharon. Sharon looked at her in disbelief.
Who says Vano and I are forbidden to see you, Mama?
Sharon and Dilla's attention was immediately drawn to Vian, who was standing behind Dilla. Vian's eyes were so sharp looking at his mother, and Dilla was stunned.
Vano and I are busy, Mum. In a few months, we'll be graduating and we're very busy. Why do you blame others without knowing the truth?
Vian asked. He looked at his mother with disappointment. Just like Vano had experienced, Vian felt embarrassed in front of Sharon now. His mother, who spoke without thinking, repeatedly embarrassed Vian. Vian, I didn't mean it like that.
Never mind, Ma. Now I've seen for myself how you behave until Vano is very disappointed in you. Mama's behavior like this makes me and Vano ashamed, Ma.
Vian said. After that, Vian approached Sharon and pulled Sharon to leave immediately. Vian didn't say anything, and that made Sharon worried.
Vian, you?
I'm sorry. I was a fool to ever believe in Mama's words. I'm ashamed, Bun. Why do you always act like a child?
Vian whispered. Sharon sighed softly at that. Even in situations like this, Vian did not forget his official call to Sharon. Vian closed his eyes, trying to control his emotions. Sharon touched Vian's shoulder and rubbed it gently.
She threw a gentle smile, trying to calm Vian down.
Vian smiled back at Sharon. He was lucky that Sharon was his stepmother. Sharon never provoked him when he or Vano were having problems with their mother. Instead, Sharon always tried to calm him down. Vian was really ashamed of Sharon.